how to set clear expectations and give better feedback. What's up, everybody? Coach Tony from Bonvec Strength, and yesterday I was working with a brand new client, first time I'd ever met them and coached them, and it helped me kind of gather my thoughts in terms of how I would advise other coaches to set expectations and give feedback to new clients, and then also how I as a coach would like to receive feedback from a lifter that I'm working with. And this is something that you kind of learn over the years as a coach, and how to kind of adjust your approach and set expectations and give feedback kind of based on the level of experience with the person, what the person's kind of overall attitude and demeanor is like. But I think there are some really basic standard level ways to do this so that you can get off on the right foot with a new client. And if you're a lifter who's receiving coaching, you can kind of tailor the experience to what you want to get out of it, because everybody is going to give and receive feedback a little bit differently. So it's important to kind of for the coach to tailor that feedback to the person that they're working with. So what I always start out with, any coach or trainer who's worked with a new client always gets some sort of intake form, and that intake form has some sort of health history on it, and you can kind of look at it and see what that person has dealt with in terms of injuries, in terms of illnesses and stuff like that. So whenever I'm meeting somebody for the first time after the typical introductions and small talk, trying to find common ground, whatever, you always want to ask them about that sort of injury history. If there's something on there that's going to affect the way that they exercise, you want to talk about it. And what I always clarify after we've talked about that specific injury history is that anything that we do here in this first training session, if it hurts, if it feels sketchy, if it just feels uncomfortable, if you're not comfortable with what it is we're trying to do, tell whatever coach on my staff that you're working with. Be very, very clear that you're uncomfortable with the situation. And that can be from a pain standpoint, that can be from an execution standpoint, and just the exercise seeming too complicated. If we, as the coaches, have chosen a too complicated exercise on day one, shame on us. But set the very, very clear expectation that we're not going to come down on you for being in pain or being uncomfortable with an exercise. I always try to kind of lighten the mood by saying we're not going to call you a little bitch, figure it out. That's not who we are. There's always something else we can do that's non-painful, that's a little bit more in their comfort zone, but kind of helping them kind of disarm them a little bit in that situation to understand that yes, we're here to work hard, yes, we're here to push you as coaches, but not to the point where we're pushing through pain, because we want people to have a good relationship with exercise and not have it be something that they're dreading doing. So setting those clear expectations for communication right away. The other thing that we do is I help people understand right away that our coaching style, our coaching philosophy at Bonvec Strength is probably a little bit different than what they've experienced, especially if they've worked with, personal trainers or more boot camp style stuff, where a lot of the feedback is very verbal, or where the feedback is a little bit more just, kind of cheerleading encouragement if you're in that go, go, go boot camp environment where there's not the time or maybe even the expertise to give more technical feedback. So I help them understand that. And, we are very exercise and drill driven in terms of teaching. You've heard me talk probably about the way we do working warm-ups and the way that we choose supplementary exercises to have a teaching component built in. And I help them understand that right away. I tell them, hey, this is probably going to be a little bit different from a coaching perspective than what you're used to. We're not going to bark at you every set and every rep. Understand that if you're doing something very, very incorrectly to the point where we need to stop you, absolutely we'll intervene, but we're going to tell you at the beginning of the exercise what we expect, setting clear expectations for technique, for execution. We're going to let you do the exercise, and then after the exercise, we'll give you the feedback. And so that helps people understand that if they're in the middle of a set and they're used to being coached every rep, but they're not hearing anything from us, that's okay, that we're not, ignoring them, or that, they're wondering if they're doing something wrong. We help them understand, first of all, no news is good news. If you're doing things correctly, we're not going to jump in. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And number two, is just our coaching style to allow them to do the exercise uninterrupted, and we bookend the feedback at the beginning and the end of the exercise. And that's different for a lot of people. So we set those clear expectations that that's the way that we're going to coach things. And a lot of times in our small group setting, there are times where we have to kind of bounce in and out with different lifters. Okay, we're coaching you for these 30 seconds, then I have to go and I got to spot this person on their heavy top set of bench press or whatever, and then laying out that clear expectation that, like, hey, I'm not going to be on your hip for every set, every rep of every exercise, but if you need something, feel free to flag me down. Say, hey coach, come on over, I want you to take a look at this. So setting that clear expectation on day one that we're always available to help you, but we're not always going to be on your hip. That is kind of setting the groundwork for autonomy, for confidence, to be able to do a good chunk of their training without always having to be babysat. And I think that's important, because if people feel like they're being ignored in a training situation where they're expecting a certain amount of supervision and feedback, that can kind of be upsetting to the client. So setting that expectation right away. Something else that I've found to be pretty crucial in terms of establishing that good coach to lifter relationship right away is figuring out what style of feedback that a lifter wants. Specifically, do you want their coach to be more positive and more encouraging, and kind of, sugarcoat things when you're not meeting my expectations in terms of effort, in terms of execution of the exercise? Do you want me to be really nice about it and really positive and encouraging, or do you want me to be a little bit more blunt? Probably not like negative feedback, but do you want me to be tough on you? And ironically, my natural coaching style is to be very, very positive. I coach people the way that I would want to be coached. I'm super sensitive. If you tell me I'm doing something wrong, I probably am going to feel bad about it, because I'm always trying to do my best. But ironically, most people tell me the other side, like, no, I want you to just shoot it to me straight, be blunt, don't sugarcoat it, tell me when I'm not meeting your expectations. And if I lay out the expectations very, very clearly on that first day, in terms of what I'm expecting from you in terms of effort, what you're going to get from me in terms of coaching and feedback and coaching style, then we can kind of come to that common ground, so that when I do need to be blunt and be tough on that person, that's what they've come to expect. They have explicitly told me that's what they want. And I think it's a huge mistake that I've made over the years as a coach, expecting everybody to want the same style of feedback and always have that kind of like cheerleader encouragement, like overly positive. We call it like toxic positivity, because not everything's great all the time. Sometimes you need a coach to tell you, like, hey, you're not giving the level of effort required to meet the goals that you told me that you have. So having somebody who can shoot it to you straight without making it personal, without making it, an insult on their character, on their integrity, but just like, hey, you said you want XYZ, your effort's not really where it needs to be right now to get to XYZ. Let's raise that level of effort. So that's mostly on the coaching side. Hopefully that's helpful to any of you listening who are trainers or coaches. But let me talk a little bit about what I, as a coach, want from my lifters in terms of feedback for me. I already talked about kind of the, pain or discomfort or whatever. I think it's important for a lifter to tell me how much they're willing to push through something that's painful, something that's uncomfortable, in order to get to their goals. Because I was talking to a physical therapist about this the other day. We have some clientele who are very high level power lifters who have these big lofty goals, and just the nature of the sport of powerlifting is that even if you do everything right from a technique standpoint, if you manage the load relatively well, you give them deloads when it's necessary, sometimes you can still run into pain. And it's important for the coach to hear from the lifter, like, this is how much I'm willing to push through. Like today, like, this hurt at this level, on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever, and I'm willing to deal with that. Or today, this hurt at this level, and that's too much for me. I'm not willing to push through that, so we need to either adjust the weight that we're lifting or change to a different exercise, something like that. On the other hand, there are people who are not training for anything incredibly ambitious in terms of weight on the bar that they want to lift, and those people might have a much lower tolerance for how much pain they're willing to deal with. Maybe that pain tolerance is 0. Maybe it's like, okay, as soon as this exercise hurts, I don't want to do it. I want to do something else. I'm not coming to the gym to push through pain. I'm coming to the gym to improve my quality of life, so I'm not willing to deal with that. And that's fine. It's important for the lifter to communicate that to the coach. I want to do something else because this hurts. That's all good. I would rather know that than push somebody through pain Or on the other hand, the lifter who has very, very ambitious goals, I also don't want to be the kind of coach who at any sign of discomfort or pain, I'm like, okay, nope, we're doing something else, because that's unrealistic. You're not going to reach high levels of any sort of uh, accomplishment in any sport if you're not willing to deal with some degree of pain. And finally, as a coach, I want to know if my lifter is having a bad day, or if there's something going on outside the gym in their life that's going to affect their performance in the gym. And I want them to feel comfortable telling me that, so I can adjust the program or my coaching style accordingly. And if you're a lifter working with a coach for the first time, you may not feel comfortable yet disclosing that information, where it's like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather because of XYZ, or there's something going on at home or going on at work that's super stressful, and that's going to probably decrease my level of performance. It's on the coach to be able to establish that relationship and that trust with their lifter. But something that really irritates me as a coach is when I'm working with a lifter who I feel like I have a good relationship with, and there's something going on that's going to negatively affect their performance, and they don't tell me about it because they feel like they need to live up to, their this certain standard of performance, and they always have to be at their best, always on their A game. We're all human. Nobody's on their A game all the time, especially when we're doing something like powerlifting, which is a glorified hobby. Yes, it's something that many of us love, and many of us kind of center our lives around it. But the point is that we're never always going to be at our best. We're not machines. We're human. We're affected physically by things that are happening, psychologically, that are stressing us out. So I, as a coach, want to know what's going on outside of the gym so that I can be a better coach for you in the gym. And it doesn't necessarily require, this fully divulging all this very, very personal information. Sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, got something going on at work. I feel super stressed out. My body's feeling it. Maybe I should go a little bit lighter today. And having that relationship from coach to lifter where they feel comfortable telling you that, I think is really, really crucial. Because again, if we set these expectations early on, if I as a coach set expectations for the lifter, here's the level of effort that I'm looking for, there's not always going to be the physical resources for that lifter to sustain that level of effort. So if the lifter knows that they're not going to be able to live up to those expectations that we set early on, they got to say something, because otherwise I'm going to think if they're dogging it and living below those effort expectations that were set early on, I'm going to think that they're doing it because they're not trying their best. And if they can clarify to me that, like, hey, today I can't try my best, I'm not going to give that level of effort that we established early on, then I can be empathetic, I can be sympathetic, but I can also adjust the training load accordingly, because there's always something we can do. Doing something, even if it's of reduced intensity, reduced effort, is probably always going to be better than doing nothing at all. So a lot of different ways to set clear expectations, a lot of ways to tailor feedback, both coach to lifter and lifter to coach, based on the trusting relationship that you establish. So if you're a coach working with lifters, or if you're a lifter being coached, hopefully those suggestions, those outlines can help you be a better communicator overall, so both sides, coach and lifter, can be happy with the overall result.